Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. For another normal show, smoking this nub Cameroon here. It's really funny. One of the guys, somebody posted something about how I don't know how to smoke cigars. I'll just tell you a secret. The people that run around telling you that there's a way to smoke a cigar are those that have no clue how to smoke a cigar. And they only smoke little cheapy New Worlds. And his whole thing was how I was actually physically smoking it, which is hilarious. As if you can tell in the dark, it's kind of funny. He's one of those guys that always comments about your zipper being undone and something's on your crotch on the outside of your pants. And it's like, hey, why don't you stop looking at my balls while I'm fucking talking to you, gay? So there's this new documentary coming out called, it's out now for $20 on Amazon. Here we are in the middle of this. Everyone's unemployed, and the guy releases his video for $20 online. It's Dr. Stephen Greer releasing a documentary on Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And a friend of mine sent me a kind of an advanced trailer, which calls right out to our Feeding Attraction episode, which just came out a few days ago. What I want to talk about during this episode is this notion that, he's painted a picture of UFOs and how I shouldn't say that, extraterrestrials and how they're actually playing a role. Like they're upgrading the narrative considerably, I think, for most of the stories that we've already heard. But there was this video, I guess it's part of his movie, which it's called like the other 1%. So 1% of the world's population is 75 million people, roughly, right? And what he asserts is what was already published, and there's no violation in saying it again and saying it better, because he tends to create a great product. He really creates an entertaining product. You could think what you want about Greer, but he delivers, and he keeps upgrading his offering. And it seems to be kind of harmless fun, We'll get into all that. But as part of his film, I guess, and this is just some B-side track that he didn't put in the film, the book, The Holographic Universe. If you haven't seen it, if you haven't read it, you can get it in any bookstore or online. You can probably get an audiobook as well. As I remember the book, the first half of the book is really what he's talking about, and the second half of the book goes really wild about stories of people in Africa that could manifest things just by squeezing volcanic dirt, and they could come up with candy. Anything that they saw foreigners bring in, they could mass produce. This one dude could mass produce jewelry and all kinds of stuff. But the first half of the book talks about our participation in creating this universe and affecting it. You see, the misnomer for me, in my opinion, is that we totally control this place. But because there's so much movement, it's like everyone is pedaling a big vehicle going in a direction. And if you want the thing to change directions, the most you could do is, push in a different direction, and maybe on some micron level, the vehicle changes direction, right? You have to get the whole group of people, go left. And everyone's like, go left. And the thing goes left, right? So we think we can only create tiny changes, which is probably proportionate to the population, maybe what can go on. Unbeknownst to me, I guess, he presents a graphic that says that there are universities all around the world that I guess have been around for decades, like more than 3 decades, that have random number generators, which are powered on at all times. The numbers are transcribed and tracked. And during events like 9/11 and other gigantic things, these machines behave differently. AKA, i.e., they are not so random. There's chemical states where I guess you can freeze helium down to a particular state, and I forgot exactly the terminology, but it's one of these situations that at this pure point in the freezing process, you have utter unification of the ether and therefore you have the perfect liquid, He's always been a big proponent, as I understand it, that if you can get a group of people to come together and think, and this has been proven in different things, those folks that the Japanese guy that created artwork of snowflakes based on a group of people sitting in a circle thinking towards the water as it froze, and then hate water looked really gross and love water was gorgeous and unified. But he's been claiming for 20 years that all you have to do to get aliens to show up, and I think Whitley Strieber may have been one of the first people to say this, you just need to get together multiple people and think towards them, and then they come towards you, and then you have an experience, and most of them only have lights in the sky sort of thing. Again, no contact. I mean, what's strange about the whole idea, because when I was, again, you guys have heard the story hundreds of episodes ago, I kept telling the story over and over again while I was reading Whitley Strieber's book, Communion. At the end, it was Christmas time, and I woke up talking to a gray alien who told me what was in one of my Christmas gifts, and it was the most unique Christmas gift that I had never seen in real life, which was origami paper. I was certain it was an album because it was square and thin. Woke up the next day, girlfriend's washing dishes. I'm looking right at her. I sit down. I'm looking at this thing. It's like it's an LP. She always gives me records, and I love that. And I touched it, and it was soft. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, holy crap. I couldn't have guessed it because I didn't have any knowledge that origami paper was square. If anyone had asked me at gunpoint, I would have said 8x11. I would have said the paper's colorful on both sides. I had no idea it was only colored on one side, and that part of origami is to fold it such the white's on the inside and the color's on the outside. I mean, if it wasn't difficult enough, guys. So in his movie, he is going to demonstrate this because the trailer has it. It looks like they're standing on tombstones almost in this tiny clip. You get to see a split-second clip where they're kind of holding their arms out. And I mean, what's cool about it is he's conducting experiments like that. I mean, who does that? Hey guys, want to go out in the desert and then all stand around talking to aliens, when they're not there, and then see if they come? Sure. Now, some people think that Greer is an insider who is prepping and priming humanity for the fake alien invasion, and that he disseminates truth about the intelligence agencies and 9/11 and stuff to get you on his side, and then he's steering you into thinking that these aliens exist. I definitely had a short stint in my life where I was very cynical about that guy. I wouldn't say very, but probably my version of very, which is not so intense. But his, I don't know. I mean, if we're looking at Agenda 21 killing everyone off with this full-on Fauci Gates Foundation virus that we finally found the patent on it, which is so odd. I read the patent today, and it was like the whole genome sequence is in the patent, but it talks about how it's going to facilitate a vaccination, all this other stuff. It's like, it just makes no viral sense, right? It's like, oh, we're gonna create a catcher's mitt for snowflakes, and if it has to be exactly this shape, size, and before the catcher's mitt works, if the snowflake is different, the catcher's mitt doesn't work. And it's like, that's a virus, right? It's always different. It always mutates. Everything mutates constantly. If you just look at the life of a virus in this world, you would go, how the hell is this ever going to be the same? So anyway, back to Greer. I think what he's promoting is, one, he's a physician, he's an MD, he's an ER MD, who then retired, was promoting this stuff on the East Coast. Then he miraculously gets pulled in by the Central Intelligence Agency and is told to work with them. It's like, yeah, credibility kind of just got real thin there, right? But there's this thing he wants to create an avalanche for, which is, hey, everybody, let's take this manifest destiny, this consensus reality, as I call it, And let's all think towards, let's try to get 1% of the population, 75 million people or more, to do my magic box trick, which is to all have the same thought, to see if we can manifest a better reality. Maybe it's a pacification during the time of the demise of mankind. But now his narration of aliens, it's interesting. It's like he doesn't officially say, I don't think in his entire career doing this, that aliens are this way. There's only one species, there's two species, they're doing this, they're doing that. He has always been kind of a listener with his Disclosure project, which I believe was 2001-ish. Somewhere way back then. Look that year up before you quote it to anybody. But like I said in several episodes, he pulls in a bunch of people who are contractors, military people, and he says, look, you've all been sworn to secrecy from 20 to 50 years. Remember, the 50-year Secrecy Act is designed to get you to your death before you can say anything. On remote occasions, people exceed those, and on other remote occasions, people violate those. But they all got together, and then they had a little press conference, which was a fairly decent size, and they all went up to the podium and quoted what they were involved in and said that they'd be willing to testify in a court of law that this happened. And kind of by having everyone's back and by disclosing it, there's very little threat left in them towards those who want to conceal it, right? Then, like I said before, he's done lots of interviews with folks. I think most of them reek of fiction. There's a few that are good as gold. And that's what you want. I mean, seriously, if we had the Deep Thoughts College and we had funding, or we make inventions that we can sell to create money, and we had the money to do what he did it. You travel all across the globe because you have to talk to every single person on planet Earth. Now, he definitely focused on Americans, but you'd want to interview everyone, and you're going to sift through probably 98% crap. People making up stories, or at least they change their stories from previous tellings. They can't remember. Nothing makes any sense. Bob Lazar saying he's got 2 degrees from the 2 biggest colleges on Earth, but he doesn't have a t-shirt or a photograph of ever being there. No one has any folktale stories of the smartest guy they know in the world, right? If you knew someone in this world that got a physics degree from Caltech and MIT, you would know their name. You would know what year they did it. They would be famous in social circles and especially academic circles. In fact, he would have never had to work for the military. He would have just had to have done what Neil deGrasse Tyson did. Neil deGrasse Tyson doesn't have 2 degrees like that. And that dude's famous. Bill Nye, the douchebag guy, he has no degree in science other than, civil engineering or something, and he's famous. So Bob Lazar would have been utterly, utterly renowned way before he said that they erased him. Again, family photos. How do you go to a university for a year or 2 years, which is MIT or Caltech, and you don't take a photo? You don't have an alumni shirt? You don't have a degree piece of paper? Or do they sneak into your house and burn everything up? I mean, it's just a tall tale, okay? So at least Greer kind of told you he talked to the agencies, he talked to the government, and he's not, if it turns out to be nefarious, well, at least he told you right to your face. But what I think is interesting is this whole thing is evolving, and he seems to be sort of this cornerstone of evolution in these theories, meaning we hang on to previous storylines that people have told quite a long time ago. Like, again, the Greys were really popular. Well, first it was green men from outer space, and then it eventually evolves to Greys. And then David Icke took it to the reptilians. Then by his disclosure thing, some guy sat in his disclosure project and said there's like 27 aliens that he knows of, a species, right? And then when the press guy says, well, what do they look like? The guy goes blank, and then he doesn't know. He's made up that it's a complete lie. He's sitting on the panel too, which is really crappy. And he goes, they look just like us. Oh, how convenient, right? I mean, seriously, I could be in that thing just as a writer and just bull-faced lie to everybody. If I'm going to lie, it would have been, well, some of them look like us and others look like reptilians, and there's some that are insectoid. The grays definitely exist, but there's 2 or 3 races of grays. I mean, you could just make it up, right? What's so hard about that crap, right? It's just nuts. But luckily, they're not good at lying. It's good. So, but in his trailer for this new movie, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, what a great name, right? He is saying, and I believe he says the number 4, I think, or maybe he gestured it or something. I mean, I wasn't intending it, but I think he said something like 4 species. And it's like they're watching mankind to see what we're going to do. And they love the thing that it's when we discovered nuclear weapons, they became concerned. And so the idea is, are we going to exit the world and pose a problem? Now, the truth of the matter is that I don't remember what his stance is on the moon. I think he probably believes we went. But the idea that we know so far, we haven't pulled it off. And I mean, like real deep interstellar travel, interplanetary travel, we just haven't done it. I mean, no one is contending we've never been to another planet. The only thing that we contend on this show is that through information that we've received and some mega deductions and logic, we haven't been to the moon either. We want to go. We need to figure it out. But if the aliens are really looking at us and going, oh, that's all you got? Okay, well, you know, they turned to another alien. They're like, well, they're not going to get off this rock or this whatever for visibly a long time, you know? What I don't know that has ever been postulated is the following. What if we are them, which I believe almost de facto we are. If we are them and they've dropped us off for this experiment to watch us, to see what we do. You know, imagine you woke up in a society that is billions of years old, which is what he said in the trailer. Some of these species are millions of years older, and some of these species are billions of years older, which means the million-year species should be answering to the billion-year species, you would think. But you're completely sophisticated. And so there's no more war and there's no more issues. Now, there's a biological genetic issue here I'm going to confront myself with, but what if they dropped off, you know, a Caucasian species, an African species, you know, Chinese species or Asian species, I should say, and a bunch of little subsets, right? They dropped us off a really long time ago. You know, they're native landers, have fun with pyramids and all kinds of stuff using, you know, materials that are here, taking advantage of ethereal technologies and the sort of the natural exuding energy from the meridians of the earth to move big stones. And they just kind of set up and have some fun, knowing that this is going to eventually catch up because they're in Egypt, these African folks. I just watched a whole boatload of new Egyptology videos, and it's just so evident. You look at the paintings, people argue with me all the time. You know, some people are just racist and they can't handle it. They're just like, they weren't black people. And I was like, yes, they were. They may not be the ones that are there now, but they definitely were. They have been taken over the years, and they ended up being Arab. And I'm sure there were some Arab pharaohs as well, but King Tut's bust, even though he has a more narrow nose, you know, it's very evident from their paintings, from their illustrations, from their coloring. They made themselves that way. But anyway, so if you're sitting there in Egypt thinking, okay, we know the full plan. Some Aborigines are being dropped off in Australia. South of here, we're getting a whole nother batch of different folks. Europe's getting these white folks, and Asia's got this other thing going on. Native Americans, all this stuff. So your Incas. And then eventually, over thousands of years, they know they're going to bump into each other. But for now, everybody's safe. You can have a good time. Because they want to see, without all the technology and education, what would their species do? You just want to know. For any race that seems superior, right? And unfortunately, what's interesting about this whole superior race thing is, the only exception to this rule would be maybe the Nazis. They seem to be really smart. They managed to create a massive army with all this technology. So yeah, they were rolling with some serious brain power. Okay, but when you come over to the United States and you look at the white folks that say the white race is superior, if you have a full mouth of teeth, you are utterly lucky, right? But they just seem to be super undereducated folks. And, it's okay to want to preserve your kind. I mean, that's okay. But to the extent you would, dislike other races, I just think it's just strange. Just go have babies, man. That's how you do it. The fallacy with my presentation for this hypothesis of them dropping themselves off, being us, would be that we would have to kind of root out the good genes, because there would be, one, we're not gray aliens, right? So we're not reptilians. We're not these other species. So we would have to actually sort of filter out all the benefits we have had genetically. I'm hoping that if we ever lived 1 million to 1 billion years, the greed is something that filters out of us. And I shared a book project with Robert Llewellyn, the comedian in England, and he wrote the first, I think, 7 chapters, and I wrote the last 5 chapters. And I wrote a whole section about greed and where it comes from. And I made it a Douglas Adams kind of funny intro to the book, to that particular chapter. But I'm hoping, and for my book, it was never going to leave any life force in the universe, because the inceptional race that created all life was massively full of greed. The only thing they've been doing is diluting it down over the millennia. But so he's saying that they're observing us, Dr. Greer, and that they're participating, and that it is his hope. I mean, everyone's hope. I would love for this to be true, that they're going to intervene. They're going to come down and they're going to intervene in this shit show, which is sort of the George Soros, Bill and Melinda Gates, Fauci death virus show that's going on right now, and that they're going to get us all back on track. And what's funny about this, or interesting about this, I used to talk about this a long time ago, is I can't erase the notion that when you read Babylonian scripts from like 4500 BC, which is probably all wrong, is that they're, from mud tablets, that they talked about every few hundred years, this race would come out of the hills and reset society, get rid of all the corrupt leaders, take good people and appoint them to be the leaders, and they go away for however many 100 years before those folks would disappear into the genome. And then other lower vibration people would move up and become a part of the leadership, and then go back to greed. But I think we've been alive enough that if this has occurred, just to digress into this for 1 second, the unfortunate thing is, America, love us or hate us, the forefathers really did have some cool shit put together. The Bill of Rights, which became the Constitution, and then they protected everything: free speech, guns, try to keep the World Bank out of the system. And they lost to it very quickly, of course. Just the second these guys die, these assholes are right there, taking it back over again. But they're all Masonic, aren't they? I just listened to some other video. It was a New Yorker who became a master Mason, and he sits in front, maybe some of you have seen this, he sits in front of a table, and he doesn't appear to have like the highest IQ on planet Earth. God bless him. I mean, if it was Richard Feynman telling me this, it would be a whole different thing. But he says, look, you get up to about 30 degrees and you don't know anything. You believe all the hype that they've told you, but then 31, 32, and 33, And then I guess you get anointed to master after that. You learn that they're all Satanists and, they believe in that the devil is their dude, man. Which seems strange because if you look at that kid on YouTube with the long hair, he typically does, he doesn't quite do it anymore, but he used to wear the leather jacket with the open chest, and he had 666 was part of his thing because he used to be a Satan worshiper. And he said, well, what I learned was that guy said that he made a whole episode about it's like 8 years old. And he said, well, if you have any religion and you're part of the Church of Satan, they laugh at you because they don't believe in anything. And so if you worship anything, according to him, they think that you're primitive and you're stupid. And so he goes, the whole joke on the public is that we think that they worship Baphomet and a bunch of other stuff. And there's so many mixed signals, but you're talking about an institution that lies to stay in existence. So I wouldn't take anything from any of these folks, but I can't reconcile, what is it? Google Mail's icon is the apron from a Mason. Go look it up. Go look up Google Mail icon and then Masonic apron. It's the same. It looks like a piece of mail. It's literally white and red. It's exactly Gmail's icon, right? And so you're kind of going, who's good and who's bad? We know that the Statue of Liberty represents European banking. It's Queen Semiramis, right? But the Washington Monuments, the phallus of Nimrod, which is technically, supposedly the husband of Semiramis. I am eager to see Greer's thing, but I just, for whatever reason, I don't want to spend $20 on it. I think that's a little gougy for this time frame. I'm sure he worked really hard on it, and I think he does deserve his money back. And hopefully with the folks that are early adopters, he manages to make his money back. What's interesting about it for me is that I try to keep a good artery open for alien this and alien that. Now, one of the things that's starting to loop back into the fray, especially with Coast to Coast AM, and this is really funny, man. Most of you have run into Planet X theory, which was huge in 2014, I believe. And they were trying to say, man, the world's going to end. It's this whole theory that there's this alternate solar system that orbits our solar system and that there's a different sun that is going to come back around. I believe it's called Nemesis. The planet's Nibiru. And it circles Nemesis. Hopefully I got these names right. And that planet actually holds our ancestors, which genetically spliced themselves into the primates of Earth to create a slave nation, which then mined the world dry of a bunch of gold because they needed gold in their atmosphere so they wouldn't die. I mean, it's just like a kind of a bad sci-fi story, right? You've got genetic engineering capabilities and you can't make your own gold out of, fusion. Sounds stupid. But George Norrie just had this guy on who predicted the world was going to end in 2014. And so they start the interview off and George Norrie's like, well, you're still alive and you're still here. And what's really going on is the dude needs more money. So he's milking it one more time, taking advantage of the fact that Russia had a meteorite that came in. Yeah, big mother that blew up and all this other stuff. And again, okay, so it shows up, it does this sonic boom, it blows up into some pieces, it blows up a ton of windows, it's filmed from a ton of different angles. And the only thing that was really strange about that footage, de facto strange about the footage, was this thing's coming into the atmosphere and it's huge. It just has to be gigantic. It does explode. Its explosion is so profound. I watched, half a dozen videos of surveillance cameras, people holding their iPhones or whatever they have over there, and these windows blew in. It was serious. It was wintertime. So not a good time to lose your natural barrier to the elements, right? But we didn't see a bunch of spaceships come out of the thing. But I remember, and no one ever talks about this, there was a close-up video of it where someone appeared to track quite reliably And again, someone could edit the video, but then again, someone always gets the original video. Like if I went and scraped someone's video and went into Blender and I added a UFO or some apparition, but you go download the video and it doesn't have my editing, then you just compare the two and you know I added it. Plus, it's very, very difficult to add an artificial element into live action without pros being able to see it, right? But there was this object that seemed to go faster than this thing that was entering the atmosphere. And it caught up with the thing. It went faster, and then as soon as it touched it, that's when the explosion occurs. Well, the other thing we have to remember about that, too, is that if you listen to the press response from the military of Russia, I think one of their head czars of the military said this was a CIA weapon. Now, I don't know how you get something that large into space and then crash it into the Earth. I don't know how you could find a body in space like, supposedly there's the big asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. You could have a science fiction story where, some rocket goes over to some big giant stone in space and then attaches itself and drives it to Earth and hurls it out of country. It's just too preposterous, right? Again, how do rocket engines work in space when there's nothing to push off of? It'd have to be a completely different engine that we've never seen before. But again, if you have that tech, you just do a tech demonstration to your enemy and you say, give me all your money. It'd be like pulling out a gun when your enemy just has a knife and they're 20 feet away. But isn't it an endearing idea that somehow these aliens, which are only ever lights in the sky, are coming here to protect us? They're coming here to look at us. And I've seen the trailer of his video, and he has the, Aurora type aircraft with the 3 lights in the triangle. And, it looks like a CG shot, man. It's rotating out. I mean, the thing is, what's fascinating about this is how does he come up with the movie about UFOs? And then all of a sudden he's got footage that no one's ever seen before. That's like unbelievable footage. What has he got, a hotline out there? If you come up with the best footage, give it to me. I'll give you a bunch of money, and don't give it to the world. And then maybe he makes a movie, maybe he doesn't. It's like it doesn't make any sense. But I'm telling you, man, the way that you create artificial footage that can't be easily figured out is that you make the entire shot in the computer. You don't substitute in an element where then you can start sniffing the pixels and going, there's a little bit of a contrast element here. It all looks normal. And then it looks like this thing's introduced. It's very difficult. But if you take the whole thing, because these are night shots, everything's silhouetted, right? So there's no massive detail in it. And you run it through 4 or 5 different grain filters to make it look like a telephone. And then the last thing you can do is actually film a television with the telephone to introduce a bunch of new elements. I think that in times of need, there is hope for saviors. There are countries going on right now in the world that are suffering tremendously. And I'm sure that there's either one of 2 things occurring. You have families going to God at record levels, praying for a fix from the heavens, and you have people falling from faith for good because nothing is coming from the heavens. And what's interesting to me is that I would love to interview someone like Jacob Rothschild and just ask the guy a question. Do you believe in God? Because in my opinion, he can never answer the question yes. I don't think a lot of people can believe in God with what's going on right now because of their nefarious acts. Like Pelosi. How could Pelosi ever believe in God? she has to be an atheist at a level that is like number one, you know. And I mentioned I wanted to recap on a video. I don't even know when the hell I made this video, and I don't know where I mentioned it exactly. Sammy Davis Jr. was rumored in the 70s to have joined a satanic cult that he was just fascinated by, and he wore some amulet from one of their things. And for me, it was sort of tough for me to believe that he would need such a thing, you know, because you usually feel like you have lost yourself. If you're going to join a cult, you have this emptiness and then you go for it. And it's some sort of structure to your life, you know. Now, if you read about his life and all the problems that they had, or he had, you know, showing up to venues where the Rat Pack would be doing something and they'd find out a black guy was going to show up and they said, well, you can't bring him in. He can't be here, like at the beginning. And then Frank Sinatra goes, well, then you can't have me ever again. Fuck you. And then they were like, oh, no, he can come in, you know. And so he grew up through this prejudice cycle. And of course, he was one of the most talented dudes on planet Earth. He played all these instruments. He could sing anything on planet Earth. He could dance. I mean, the guy was crazy talented. And so I had a hard time just logically putting it together in my mind. Anybody can do anything. I'm not against believing that anyone could go down these roads. What's Will Ferrell doing at a Abramovich party, doing a satanic ritual as a joke? I mean, maybe he's totally a dipshit in real life and doesn't know what he's working with. But anyway, Eddie Murphy, I guess, did this right along with Seinfeld for his little carpool show, right? And I watched this segment on this other documentary, and it showed Eddie Murphy talking about having met Sammy Davis Jr. And Eddie Murphy was raw. I mean, he was just like a real human being. It was actually probably the very first time I've ever seen him talk totally normal. If you want to see this, just go look it up. Eddie Murphy, Seinfeld show thing, or, you know, the ride along carpool thing, and you'll see him say it. Because, yeah, I met him, and he starts impersonating Sammy Davis Jr., talking about this devil worshipping cult that he had joined, and that he had told Eddie Murphy that, you know, he says, you know, the devil's as powerful as God, you know. And Eddie Murphy goes, what the fuck are you talking about? Is what I'm thinking in my head, you know. You meet your hero and he's trying to tell you that he's a devil worshiper and that, you know, he's kind of like indirectly soliciting a member. And Eddie Murphy's like, he's not into that, you know. So we are at a point now that is, again, different than anything humanity's ever been in before. I mean, the Depression, it reached levels. I mean, again, the Depression hit its peak, as I was told, okay, in 33 and 34. But it started in 29. Dude, that's 3 or 4 or 5 years later. Could you imagine this shithole show we've got going right now? In 4 or 5 years, we're standing in soup lines because it's so bad. I mean, that would suck, wouldn't it? Right? And so, you know, what was it? Snow White came out of Disney in 36 and blows up the box office because everyone's so depressed. They want to get out of this world. So they go see that movie with the last penny they have on planet Earth. So yeah, the idea of aliens is going to be pretty sexy until the world straightens up. It's what my episode was in season 1 called The Alien Promise, which is, what do you want to get out of an alien landing? What is it that you want them to offer you? Now, I don't know if I'm the only dude, okay? But you've got, trying to think. Strieber had some videos. Greer's had 2 movies now. And then tons of videos. But these videos of just lights in the sky. Everyone gets a hard on for lights in the sky. You know, they're dancing around doing it. I guess, you know, if I saw a light in the sky and I couldn't hear a drone engine and it seems to be fairly close and it's zinging around, well, one, you know, let's educate everybody again. The center of the Earth has a plasma ball core. That's why your compass works. It's not nickel iron. That's a huge lie. And the other day I was bumping around the internet and I found, I think I was looking in like recommended videos on YouTube real late at night. And I found a video that was a volcano just burping up lightning bolts, just boom, boom, boom. And a lot of you have seen this, right? It was unprecedented amount of lightning bolts. And the video was something like, why is this happening? And the person filming it's like, wow, why is this happening? It's because you've been lied to about what's in the center of the earth. What is a volcano? It's a pretty big hole to the magma layer of this earth. And so, you keep going down. Our crust is not that thick relative to the total diameter of the earth. And so you go down just a few miles, especially where you have a volcano, because you don't have that pristine layers where you're going to get oil and a bunch of other minerals down there. You have an opening. That's what Hawaii's on top of, is this amazing volcanic eruption area, right? So what else would leak out? Exactly what Tesla found in Springfield, Colorado. Lightning, electricity, power. So when you go out into the desert in pristine earth, right? Not a lot of topsoil, lots of rocks out there. Sand is just a bunch of little teeny rocks. But a lot of the outcroppings that you find in Joshua Tree and Apple Valley, any major desert in Arizona, you get a lot of ball lightning ejections out of the crust of the earth, because these seams between the rocks just go straight down. I mean, they're miles and miles and miles, but yeah, you can wait 10,000 years for one ball to come out, but they're always gestating up through the cracks. I used to think lightning came from clouds, like specifically from clouds. If you had a rainstorm, you'd get lightning. Then I moved to Southern California, and it was, again, the funniest story was my first day, August 19th, 1997. I arrive in Ventura, California. I go to my employer first, and he's like, "Oh my God, you already came back." I was like, "Yeah, I need that job." Okay, great. So he goes, "Well, you can stay at my buddy's house. He's got a room. You can squat it for a little while." So I go into this house. There's this torrential storm that just shows up out of thin air. Lightning, bam, 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 and just rain. It was insane. And 5 minutes later, it's gone and it's sunny. And I go outside and there's barely any clouds. And so I'm thinking, hey, well, that was a cool lightning storm. Look forward to those. Love those in Kansas. It's a great thing. But then it never happened again. I mean, the amount of electricity or lightning I've heard in Southern California is almost non-existent. Now, the Bay Area is different. San Francisco area, I used to sit at a 3-story building taking tech support calls for a database product that I supported, and I just watched lightning hit the ground. It was like, I just watch it literally hit the ground, and a big old puff of smoke would come out of the ground where it disrupted the soil. We'll go to Phoenix, Arizona. Ask them how many lightning storms they have. Where the ground is a particular way, lightning happens, because between the clouds that are charged and the ground that's charged, you get this arc of electricity. It's probably a negative to positive stream of cathode lightning. Okay, why tell you that? Because all of these lights over Phoenix, Arizona, which is a great viewing spot for this, what happens? You see a stream of lights that are seemingly a fairly equal distance from each other, and then they turn off in chronological order of how they turned on. First in, first out, right? Now, sometimes the military will say, "Oh yeah, we were doing test flights, training flights, and we're dropping flares." And so the flares take a little while to fall. They're designed to do that. And so you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then, of course, because flares have, fuse links, they just burn out in that way. So the military has claimed some of them. But I've heard hikers hiking in complete rocky terrains, and all of a sudden a ball lightning goes boom, and then it will actually stick at a particular altitude, spinning. Of course, it looks like a chrome ball because plasma will reflect all light because it is moving way faster. Probably about 50 times the speed of light, right? So light's just going ding, ding, ding. So it looks like a crystal ball. If it spins super duper fast, it can turn into a disc. It hits a negative air pocket, which is where your plane goes boom, you know. It zaps to the next stable spot in the atmosphere, which means, 5,000 miles an hour. It'll just go wham over to the next spot, and then it stops on a dime. It's dealing with all of the atmospheric particles that are also charged to determine where it's going to go. So there's nothing exciting, you tell me, about watching UFO claims where all they're looking at are lights. This one video got posted on our Facebook channel. This old lady is filming some ball in space. Some light, never tells you what the hell she's looking at. And then quite obviously, she is, having either clouds move in front of it or, she's got some grass in front of it. She's not cleaning out the shot. It's just it's a crappy shot. You want to see mind-blowing stuff, you look at Dave's posts where he films a star with his 500 or 1000 zoom camera. That's mind-blowing. These stars have mohawks on them. He moves the camera and they don't displace off of the ball. If it's an anomaly in his camera or if it's atmospheric distortion, that's just the mohawk's not going to stay in the same spot. It's going to move all around. You do see that too. But then when you look at the plasma energy that moves around some of these balls, again, if it's contoured, you can see it follow a spherical shape. Like it's some light bulb in space that's just burning plasma around the outside to create the illusion of stars for us, And then, of course, there's the balls that fall from space that no one's ever explained. Look up Vietnam, balls from space, spheres from space. It'll blow your mind. No one's claimed ownership for these things. How simple would that be? Except there's a liability that someone could have got plastered by one of them. Some look like fiberglass. Some look like steel mines that should be in the ocean. I don't know, man. Could be... They seem pretty small, so I don't know. There's no fuel residue. There's definitely burning on the outside of some of these things. So for me, it's just not sexy. It's just, I don't want to watch a UFO show where the only evidence they have that they exist is we prayed over some tombstones, and then all of a sudden these balls of light showed up. That's all that Whitley Strieber ever had either. Okay, the second tier to the argument is, okay, so what you're saying in these documentaries is that you get 20 people together, you all vibrate towards the aliens, you say, we accept you, we love you, please, show us that you exist. And they're willing to show up and they're able to listen to you spiritually. It's not much of a stretch. And these balls start showing up and everyone's like, oh my God, there they are. Okay, why don't they land? Why wouldn't they land? Even if they are nothing more than spiritual souls, but they look like balls of light. Well, very easily, you can talk to a ball of light. I'll tell you how. What do you need to have a conversation? At minimum, you need a binary system. Yes, no. You could even establish a maybe, or I don't know. Take the diamond that's in a baseball field. First base, second base, third base, home plate. So they're hearing you, right? That's the theory. They're hearing you and they're showing up. So you will them down. You say, please come to us and talk to us. Just come down to us. You don't need to get out of your spacecraft, or maybe maybe you're not a spacecraft. Maybe you are just pure light. And so you establish just a basic communication, maybe even build this thing in the desert. First base is yes. Third base is no. Second base is maybe. And home plate is I don't know. And then you just ask you questions. Are you from another planet? And then it's like, yes, no, like whatever it wants to do. It just hovers, and where it hovers, and maybe pitcher's mound is the please ask me another question. There you go. You have a full communication capability with an apparition. The other thing is that we all are going to measure from this point forward, for the people who listen to this show and people who would listen to the show if they could find it. They know about the fake alien invasion psyop. But again, according to von Braun's secretary, von Braun told her they're planning it from the 70s up. I mean, seriously, they were so rewarded for their hoaxy moon landings, then why wouldn't you think of that? Why wouldn't you think of a million other things too, which they have, right? I continually try to think about, it's sort of the threshold thought process that an alien race would have, or a realization or a set of qualifications that would have to be satisfied for them to cross the threshold of first contact. Now, some of us believe that they've done it, maybe inadvertently with Roswell, maybe as a result of capturing one of them from Roswell. Perhaps there was more, instigated close encounters of the third kind. I don't know about you, but once you see Close Encounters of the Third Kind by Steven Spielberg, which I believe was 1978, once you see that movie where they met a mothership after dealing with a bunch of the sub ships and just flying around, people saw them. There was like a red light was one of them. And then there were some, again, cone-shaped, ice cream-shaped things that were flying around. Beautiful work on these alien spaceships. It was just perfect. But then they make enough contact. They listen to the song. The songs are GPS coordinates. It's Devil's Tower, And so they create the fake quarantine, get everyone away from it. But people are possessed by what they saw. So Richard Dreyfuss and this woman and a few other people gravitate towards the location because they've been programmed to come. The woman's child was abducted by them at the beginning of the movie. And they all see this thing. The ones that Richard Dreyfuss and the woman make it. Everyone else doesn't make it. Military's there. Big mothership shows up, drops off a bunch of people they've abducted out of Bermuda Triangle, which is just so brilliant. I mean, god damn, that script was a golden ticket in a candy bar, man. And then in the end, Dreyfuss goes into the ship and leaves with them in this team of people dressed in these red outfits who have a little suitcase, and they're just supposed to go figure out what's there, Part of me can't shake the notion that this was a true story or based on a true story. It's a romantic idea. It just seems like, Area 51, which actually isn't a really great spot to do this because Area 51 is observable from the surrounding area. And so you couldn't have a massive ship, especially like the size of the one that was at Devil's Tower. What's funny about it is, I forgot they said there was a diameter they wanted to clear all the humans out from around that location. I don't know how many miles it was, but most of us that realize that the curvature of the Earth is not quite as pronounced as scientists say, this ship was bigger than Devil's Tower. And so, the romantic ending is that it takes off and there's the shot on Devil's Tower. And then, of course, the spaceship comes up behind Devil's Tower, which is further away, and it's bigger than Devil's Tower. And it's got all these spikes on it and with little lights on the ends and, cities up in there. And it was just a brilliant prop, right? But my question would be, if you rewind Roswell, I won't go into it deeply, but again, I went in to prove it wrong and I was like totally convinced it happened. And I must have watched 30 super long interviews with people that were part of the town, not part of the military necessarily. A couple that were part of the military, but their stories all held up over 40 years, man, which is now, 80 years. not quite 80, but 70 at least, right? But the interviews had happened over several decades. And anyway, so you have a ship that crashes. And again, the alien supposedly told the military dude, don't worry, no one's coming. Well, if there was anything else, apparently that wouldn't be true. But I also can't shake the fact that this woman, Laura Eisenhower, the granddaughter of Ike, the president from Kansas, she just blatantly says that aliens were a big part of her father or grandfather's, I guess you would call it foreign policy, that he was dealing with, I think she said something like 4 species. There was a lot. There was a drop on, what was it, 8chan by a guy who called himself R, who said that Kennedy had to deal with it as well. Well, if Laura's telling the truth, then Kennedy would definitely have inherited that communication issue. All right. This also negates a lot of the Planet X stuff because according to Planet X people who are channeling aliens from planet Nibiru, they only get a chance like once every epoch. I mean, it's like thousands of years before they get the chance to revisit because their planet's not close enough for them to use their spaceships to get to us to then genetically engineer us and all this other stuff. Boy, would that be a different visit this time around, wouldn't it? But, I'm looking at this woman. Just look her up. She has a channel. Laura Eisenhower. I think it's Laura. So, everyone has one of those relatives that's sort of on the black sheep list of being kind of crazy. At least the public thinks that those people exist. Some people are demonized into those containers. But, if this was true, let's just take her at face value. Let's look at the logistics that would have created this moment where she just blatantly says that her grandfather dealt with aliens. And again, there's all these old guys that are part of Project Disclosure from Stephen Greer's project that say that this is exactly what happened. That I believe it was, I think it was Eisenhower or Truman. Truman's like a decade earlier, right? Truman was the president when Roswell happens, right? But I think it was Ike that said that he had, one of his minions got interviewed with this oxygen tube and he's in a hotel. Very Streeberish story. But the guy says to the camera, he's like, yeah, I was this dude. And he talks about all his rank and how he got Q clearance and that he was sent by the president because no president's allowed to go to Area 51. I mean, what's up with that? I mean, how could you even put up with that? I mean, if I was president, I'd have Air Force One fueled up, ready to go. Military. Secret Service can just go to the side. Military escort, right? Hold a press conference to say, I am flying to Area 51. I'm taking a squadron of fighter pilots, the best Top Guns in the world, all psychologically vetted, all in this to win this. And we're going to land in 51. We're going to stream the whole event. And here we go. And then just see if they can't clean that place up in the time it takes me to get there. But I would start from maybe Phoenix, Arizona. So the flight's about 20 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, right? Clear that up real quick. Commander-in-Chief is Commander-in-Chief, baby. But Eisenhower's granddaughter would have been raised with this knowledge as if it is nothing. Yeah, Grandpa had to deal with a bunch of aliens, but we don't want to talk about that. Why? Well, these intelligence people will kill you. So now it's 2020. Her grandfather's been dead for a long time. Maybe her parents are gone or not so worried about it anymore, or maybe they still are, but she isn't anymore. So she gets on YouTube and says it. Well, at this point, it's pretty easy just to say she's crazy. But why would, put yourself in her shoes. Let's say it's a lie. So you would be a grandson or granddaughter of a president. You have an agenda, I guess. And so you get on the YouTube, man, because she could be part of this whole fake alien invasion thing, I guess. Like, what are you guys waiting for? Let's do something different than this lockdown the universe thing. But then she says this. What would be the end objective if everything she was saying was completely fake and she knew it was fake? To make yourself look crazy online? I mean, I'm a pretty good story writer. I could probably rehearse, one of my stories, and then I could tell you guys an episode which makes up a bunch of stuff that never happened. And then, okay, well, I've told a big bold-faced lie, which now I have to remember, right? Because if I got any details wrong and you guys believe me, and then you cultify around my house or whatever, and you're like, oh, tell us about the, whatever aliens from outer space. You're our guy. You're going to save the universe because they seem to like you, and they're all going to, oh my God, the burden of continuing to tell a lie of that magnitude. That's why lying sucks. I mean, it's like I have no patience the truth is hard enough to remember and find in the first place. So this woman's out there, I don't know, committing hara-kiri with her life, or maybe she is totally bona fide nuts. But she said it in such a matter-of-fact way, it blew my mind. So I'm having a problem shaking this notion. But the R dude talked about the Greys and said that Kennedy knew about them and the Greys and their agenda. Now, some people said he doesn't mean aliens, he means Grey operatives. All right. Would have been nice to clarify that in a little message. It's just some BS post on HN. You can't put any validity to it. But it's interesting to hear the archetype of the story evolve, change, reposition itself, meaning most storylines didn't position themselves within the White House. Whitley Strieber's book, Majestic, positioned the whole thing in the White House for Truman, and that he was notified about Roswell. Of course, he's not allowed to see anything. It's all taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the end. And I guess he just, he supposedly took the, OSS, turned it into the CIA, and that was all to investigate the disappearance of Americans through alien abduction. There's that dude out there I've talked about in the past, who's the psychologist from, I think, New York City, and supposedly he is a therapist specifically for abductees. And you listen to his stories, and according to this guy, people are abducted constantly around the world. And I mean, New York City alone has got apartments full of aliens, and they're holding, humans captive, and they make humans go out and get stuff for them. I mean, my God, the stories are all over the place. So as we globalize communication through the internet, we had old stories kind of get vetted and retired, and new stories evolve. And it just seems sort of like if you overlay the attention span of mankind, the average ability for man to come up with new storylines that are kind of modifications of obviously previous stories, you have this thing that's kind of like Hollywood overlaying on top of the ufology groups, or maybe even at a brute force way. Music, every decade usually births a new archetypal story. Now, a bunch of us are obviously really sort of fed up with Hollywood. Well, it's not Hollywood's fault in one way that the stories, we're at a record pace of telling stories, right? You got Hollywood, you've got Netflix, Amazon, HBO, Apple's getting into the game. So we have Hulu. All these groups are trying to fund new stories that are going to be gripping. And so when they bump into a Westworld, based off the old Michael Crichton book / movie, when something grabs the audience, what did Westworld win? Something like 10 to 15 Emmys. I mean, the show just blew up, right? They hang on to it. They massage it. They pay people tremendous amounts of money to come up with a season 2, season 3. And we all show up because we're bored to death. And so with the alien conversation, as I've noted several times, we exhaust the story of the Greys. About the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, the gray thing had been beautifully exploited by Whitley Strieber. I mean, you have to give this guy credit. He created very entertaining franchises, 3 books plus Majestic. Then he started touring ufology groups and just outwardly saying, you know, I've been abducted 1 billion times. He's always anally raped. Mm-hmm. And then what was the next trend? The next trend was David Icke's thing, the reptilian aliens. And now all of a sudden, you get not only a new alien species, which is reptilian, which has been, illustrated. And I mean, what did Captain Kirk fight up in Apple Valley? He fought this lizard dude, right? We had V, the series out of the late 70s, early 80s on TV, where reptilians were hiding in human costumes, right? With their little flat earth disc thing in their promo poster. But he blows that up. And now it's not only aliens, but they run the world. And they are shape-changing into Queen Elizabeth and everybody else that's bad in the world. And what's kind of funny about that is the whole thing of people with the internet, 10, 15 years ago, there were still people with really bad internet connections. And so you got a lot of video artifacting. And so, pupils turned into slits because of the video artifacting. It was like, oh my God, these people are shape changing right on camera. You had color patterns, not work and stuff. And now that the internet bandwidth is pretty much solidified into high band, you don't see it anymore. So you don't get any more claims of that stuff. But I think a lot of people follow David Icke with the full-blown belief that within their lifetime, they were going to actually see a reptilian alien. Well, now we're sort of in a vacuum. We have meteorites coming in. We have that anomaly I talked about. There's 2 anomalies that are fairly interesting that, I don't know, maybe it's like some badass effects dude doing it, but again, the meteorite that flew over Russia had some alien speck that traveled faster than the meteorite, and when it hit it, it exploded. Now, that doesn't make any sense for me physically without it being some propelled thing that any entity would be able to go that much faster than the original. But maybe it's like a NASCAR thing where a big rock behind it was drafting it. So the big rock is knocking all the oxygen out of the way. And so this other one is coming in at its original speed, and it's literally flying in the cone of the draft that this big one's causing. And then it does impact the core. And because maybe it's not really held together that well, that's when we got the huge explosion. All the windows are blown out. Probably about 10 years ago, if not 12 years ago, there was a video of a chemtrail that was laid in the sky, bright blue day. And you saw this like little white speck. And I mean, it's a speck in the video. And it's doing these fly-throughs on the chemtrail. And the chemtrail was erasing itself everywhere this little speck went. Like it was an alien trying to erase a poison in the sky, is the storyline with it. I think that as the suffering on Earth continues and perhaps grows in a exponential way here, it's just crazy, man. This era we're in is nuts. It is nuts, which is why we got to fight this place back to normal, way beyond. We got to fight it back to like 1999 levels, okay? But it's going to become a very popular story that aliens are coming. And we sort of want it to happen. So what's going to make these aliens step off, show up, do something? Because imagine if it's a fake alien invasion, all it's going to be is a light show in the sky. And if we're satisfied with balls of light in the sky during the day or whatever, and they fly intelligently and whatever, man, if that's going to make you change your life, I don't know what else. I mean, there's probably a lot of low-hanging fruit that would make you change your life. Here's the thing, though. Putting ourselves back in David Greer's movies, and he's not the only one, that this notion that we can all meditate in the desert and then we see lights. Okay, let's say you and I and the crew from Deep Thoughts, we all go out, we agree to meet in some remote location, and we do it, and it works. It totally works. We know we're not part of any intelligence group. We don't have, the military or some deep state thing throwing lights up there to keep us all satisfied. We're not hiring people to do, soundless drones flying in the sky. And so if it happened, let's just take it at face value. It happens to us. Hell, it happens to one of us. How much would that change your life? I'm tricking you a little bit here because the answer is it would totally and utterly change us. Because we would have seen the fact that just meditating towards them brings them to earth or lets them reveal themselves. They're already here or whatever. Wouldn't you do it the next day and the next day and the next day and the next? Would you care about your job? Wouldn't we turn into Richard Dreyfuss, where he just went batshit crazy in the movie? He got fired from his job and then he built a Devil's Tower in his living room after building it out of potatoes and a clay model from his kid's train set. I think we'd go nuts. We'd be happy because we think we'd be advancing the communication. The other thing is, let's take, because Greer always presents himself in his own movies, of course, and he's narrating ideas and concepts, which is very valuable to our brains, right? Regardless if it's true or false, it's just what I do, right? But now let's say that, let's say there's 6 of you, plus me, 7, and we do this. There's like 30 of us, but only 7 of us feel comfortable talking to the press about it. And we shoot footage and we make our own little short film proving what we saw. But we have as much money as Greer to shoot this thing at some massive level because I'll just tell you, like when they interviewed Sid Mead, a buddy of mine who made his documentary, Joaquin, he also shot this other thing of Sid in his living room, which is the best footage of Sid you've ever seen in your life. He said that the bill for 7 minutes with this massive Hollywood cinematographer who hooked up all the light perfect and just, it's beautiful footage, man. It's about $25,000 for this little tiny 7-minute production. And that's most of the time volunteered for free. I think that if we sat on a chair talking to a camera after willing aliens to show up, one of us would say, we saw aliens, man. We went out to a desert, a random desert, not known for aliens. We prayed towards them, I guess you could say, meditated towards them, wished them no harm, wished them to come to us and communicate with us. And they showed up. Even if they didn't get out of their spacecraft, they were nothing more than lights. There'd be some point in the dialogue where we're like, we saw this, man. This totally and utterly happened. And this is not us lying. This is why we did it, because we couldn't trust anyone else's footage. Everyone else has got some weird relationship with an intelligence agency. We wanted to do it just straight up a la carte. I have never heard Greer say that. And so for me, it's like Greer has never said it that way. Like he's never blown away by the fact he saw these things. So for me, because of that, I think it's very orchestrated. It just seems to lack the emotion that would be the case. Like if I'm sitting here right here, and there's probably about 20 feet between me and the fence in front of me, and I look up in the sky right there. I'm talking about them right now. Probably talked at least an hour by now. These are my footage. And they showed up right there in front of me, dancing around. You would see a version of me you've never seen before. You would hear me be giddy, amazed, blown away. I'd be talking 1,000,000 miles a minute to describe it. I'd turn the camera around to film it. I'd grab this mic off the freaking stand and just sit there and narrate the whole thing. I would be blown away. And then, let's say there's, again, 10 of you that totally believe me. And no matter where you are in this world, no matter if we're quarantined or not, you get in that station wagon and you get your ass here, and we're going to do it again. You're all on the patio. I say, we look that way. And then it happens again. I'm not going to be less amazed the second time, right? These are aliens from another place. I don't care if they're interdimensional, interplanetary, different universe. Still blown away. So let's take a 90-degree turn with the entire thing I'm talking about here. Why is it that even I have to do a show to open my mind to look at this thing in a more logical way? I do it all the time, right? We talk about a subject that everyone's accepting in one particular way. Then I start smoking a cigar. I'm sitting here. I got no input. Just this little tiny screen I stare at to make sure I'm in the shot. I don't take any drugs before I do this, right? Other than the tobacco. And I've been asking myself, why is there a trend? Why, when I'm in the house, I have epiphanies in the house for sure. But I have less in there. And I especially have, I think I have instinctual pings when I'm in the house and I'm watching the actual video on a strobing screen, an alpha-inducing screen. It's as if I am being put into a paralysis state mentally to some degree that I lack logical thinking until I turn the screen off. And because I have a pretty strong memory, I sit there and think about it and think about it and think about it. It could be that this mechanism by which we're ingesting this stuff is keeping us from having those advanced thoughts of analysis to look at what we are seeing. We're feeling it subconsciously for sure. Like again, if I watch another UFO that's just balls of light in space or in the sky, I don't give a shit if it's day or night, doesn't matter to me. I have so little interest. His trailer, which outside of what looks like a very CG triangle with 3 lights flying off in the distance and rotating out of sight. I mean, I sit in Lightwave all day long modeling 3D stuff and doing effects. It just seems like, oh, okay. I mean, it could be real, but it could also be super fake. And then he has a bunch of these ball lights, one ball light flying through a forest. I mean, it's interesting. Again, if I was there, and it was really happening and I know it's really happening, I'd still be skeptical a little bit that someone's playing with us, that some vehicle and they're just doing a test to see if we're going to, I don't know, fly off the handle or whatever. But when you get away from the screen, it's when your brain rehabilitates, goes back to normal. Your frontal lobes are fully operational. You have discernment. And that's when the logic appears. And then you start to wonder, like, oh, no wonder we believed everything on the day of 9/11. I just had a friend call me tonight. She said, I can't believe that anyone believed 9/11 when it happened. And coming from a female, that's a big step. I mean, most of you guys know. An awake female is the sexiest thing on planet Earth. And I said, well, tell me what you're thinking. And she says, well, I just went to Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Now, what she was talking about initially was Building 7. She's like, that thing was so imploded. It's obvious. Like, yeah, it is obvious, isn't it? And I said, anyone who studies basic physics looks at the other 2 towers, doing the banana peel all the way down. You're seeing explosives, man. You don't drop the cigar and then it falls and it goes, 8 feet that way and it atomizes into dust. It just nothing's ever done that in life. You've never knocked a glass off of a tabletop and it breaks in midair and atomizes before it hits the ground. And then all you have is like dust of glass on the ground. It's never happened before, but we buy it because potentially there's a lot of things going on that day. Because there's, for those of you who studied Judy Wood and the directed energy weapon evidence, which is pretty overwhelming, what we also have to remember is the the EMF wave thing we're worried about with 5G. Now, obviously, there was nothing like 5G on the ground during 9/11. It was barely, only 3G didn't even exist. And so, but if you have a metropolitan area, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Dallas, whatever, they could strategically get a bunch of people on board, especially New York, the witnesses of all this stuff. You just hit them with the wave, and who knows how much mental control they might have on you. And maybe they just make you super susceptible to the press. Who knows? Now, let's go to a real alien visitation / first contact instead of the fake alien invasion. I mean, what's crazy about it right now is, if you think about it logically for 1 second, we are all in the awake group pre-programmed to assume that if there's any type of alien contact storyline in this, probably at least this decade of 2020 to 2029, we're going to assume it's fake. But now, wouldn't it suck if the real ones showed up, and here we are going, yeah, you're not real. They're like Klaatu, Brada, Nikto, and all this other stuff. And we're like, we're not benefiting from their visit because we're trying to call them fake in our minds, but they're actually real. It would just be bad timing on their part, right? And, just cannibalizing a little bit of my Alien Promise episode, which probably a lot of you haven't seen. It's one of my favorite episodes I ever did. What would be their objective besides just saying, hi, we're here. You're a member of a much larger group, just like Star Trek did back in the day. There's a galactic group in our quadrant of the galaxy. Which, one thing I love about Star Trek is they made the galaxy so gigantic that by the time they wanted to kick off the most incredible Voyager series, they were in a different quadrant, the Delta Quadrant. And so they made it so big that they had 2 quadrants that they never touched, I don't think, the whole story. And so, there was one episode where they visited like a god type character in the first show, Next Generation. But, there's the human desire, and then there's their desires. Then there's the ruling class of our world desires. So if this thing was real, and let's just say that they had, through millions of years of evolution, as claimed by at least the military guy that took care of the alien during Roswell for a very short bit, where he got the 2 pieces of communication, which is, well, one, the overwhelming melancholy sadness that the little character had. And then he said that I fully accept the fact that I'm here and I'm never going home. And don't worry, no one's coming to rescue us. Those were the 2 messages he said. And this guy's nearly crying in the desert at like 75 years old, 40 some years after the event occurred. I mean, so it was very, very compelling video. I mean, the guy had written a book about 10 years before that, but he wasn't like, and then he's like, buy my book. He wasn't doing anything like that at all. So if they had telepathic communication on even the most basic scale, which all you need is language to figure out what the hell we want, and they showed up and they see, especially today, they see a world locked down for some scamdemic. And they're like, oh my God, these people are all in a suffering situation. Their economic system of existing, their money system is completely destroyed. By the way, the theory is that the oil barrel has crashed to force the hand of government to create a gold-backed currency, which will most likely be digital. And it ain't going to be called Bitcoin, unfortunately. But they see our suffering. And then they can probably easily deduce, because all they have to do is have a conversation. Or imagine if they read one of our minds. They're like, oh, George Soros, Bill Gates, Rothschilds, Windsors. Okay, I see the picture. We got some cleaning up to do. Got some teleportations to do. And then we're going to restore this planet, and we're going to restore these people. And you know what? They all seem to want 99.9999% of this planet. They want peace. They want poverty to be eliminated. They don't really want to have to earn a wage, but they want to work. Except some of these snowflakes, but we'll bring them around. Maybe you got a moon for those guys. So it depends if intelligence is synonymous with empathy. One would think it does. Now, Strieber's whole approach on the Greys was that they were very non-empathetic and that they just did what they wanted to and that they were minions of another race. Some people say they're fallen angels. People say they're fallen demons, you know. I would never take it to that point. Anything could be a demon or an angel, right? You're pulled over on the side of the road because you ran out of gas and you're in the middle of the desert between Los Angeles and Vegas. If I just happen to get you a gallon of gas to get you to the next gas station, I'm going to be an angel. If I charge you $100 for that gallon of gas, I'll be a demon. So, you know, what would happen, just as a scenario, if the ruling class obviously would have eyes on space, even if they don't have satellites, they would be able to see it from the ground. Here comes some motherships. Here comes some other ships out of the motherships. You would assume an invasion until you heard something nice. Maybe they interrupt communication and send a message to us and say everything's going to be fine. We're still not going to trust it because we've seen the Twilight Zone episode To Serve Man. But to the degree they continually perform well, solve problems, you know, the thing is, even if they wanted to take over the world, they're not going to want to answer to any of the current leadership. So they're just going to wipe them off the planet. You know, disable them at least one way or another. Like, yeah. You guys shut up. You've been hurting your people for a long time, or we're taking over. We're going to hurt your people. So you're out of here. So either way, the leadership of the world would react, right? And so then we would find probably some weaponized, some weaponry that we've never seen before, right? Shit they've been hiding to, I don't know, use plasma cannons or whatever. Those plasma cannons I was telling you guys about. Maybe have some of their own anti-gravity ships. You know, would they really try to pick a fight with an alien culture? You know, it should be assumed that if anyone can travel the stars, that they have amazing power. If they're dome owners, well, then just step aside, right? Because you're not going to have any control. And then sort of, where does it start? What if in the next second of your life, every leader that you ever thought was doing you harm, all the warlords, the presidents, the chancellors, all these Agenda 21 douchebags, EU's gone, Trudeau's gone, everybody, all these deep staters are history. Okay, so they're all gone. Next second, boom, everyone's gone. Now we're just here on this planet. Now what? Let's see. We would have to take over all of the systems that keep us going with our current thinking, right? Because we're stuck in paradigms of thinking. There's no paradigm of thought that's like, I'm just going to go to Walgreens and grab food. There's no more money. I'm just going to take it. Well, people are going to be panicking. We saw fucking toilet paper fall off the shelves. Give me a break. The toilet paper thing is such a disappointing situation, isn't it? It just shows that a very small group of people can fuck it up for everybody else, right? I'm going to go buy up all the fucking toilet paper out of all these places. I mean, my Walgreens finally gets a shipment every once in a while. There's like this pallet that's in the front, limit 1 per customer. There's 4 rolls in each one. It's septic tank crap. So it's like kind of trying to wipe your butt with, you know, a gust of wind. So unless these folks have like magical jelly beans that grow in the ground and create giant beanstalks of food that everybody can grab off some Willy Wonka tree, Even the best laid plans would be very difficult, and I would be assuming that, I'm just riffing here for a story. We've seen many, many, many movies from, at least the 50s up. All the X-1 episodes had it. 2000 plus had it. That they would be studying our communications from space, learn our language, learn all the situations, learn who these folks are. And probably in the dead of night, get rid of all the bad folks if that's where the route they were going to go. Even if it's a takeover where they're going to run the place and we won't necessarily like it, like the Nibiru Planet X story. But, dead people are no use to you. So unless you want to take over the planet, which seems like are we really that unique in the universe? That's if it's a dome, there's nothing. It's God on the outside and there's nothing else, right? But would they bring food and, a whole new paradigm? Would they use our communication systems to let us know what's going on? Would they hire some of us to be their ambassadors, to talk on their behalf? We'd have to go get briefed and understand the plan and ask a million questions and then ask another million questions and then find out where we're going to, who's going to address the United States, who's going to address Europe and each individual country all around the world so we can feel like someone from our area has our best interests in mind, But, it raises the question of, and this happens to us all the time. Have you ever been in a public situation where you notice someone needed help? Not a homeless person necessarily, although there's some, the Skid Row in LA, it would be difficult to help someone in Skid Row because they're very suspicious of everyone for reasons that are very understandable. But you're in a normal place. It'll happen like at a mall or something when they're used to be functioning really well. And I'm a guy, right? So some lady of any age is carrying too much and she's dropping shit and, whatever. And all you want to do is go over and say, can I help you with that? And it depends on how you communicate with her, especially in a random place, because parking lots are known for abduction places, as to whether or not you're going to freak this woman out, make her heart leap out of her chest, or whether or not she's going to go, thank you so much, and you just say, I'm right here. This is my car right here. And you just try to dispel the situation from any nefarious intent as quickly as possible. To say, my car's right there. I can help you get to your car and then it's all good. You may even say I'm not a weirdo, just say whatever you got to say, but we're human to human here. At night when I go to bed, one of my tricks for sort of preoccupying my mind away from real life, because I find that if I fantasize about something that doesn't exist, I think I said this a long time ago, I used to think of cartoon worlds and I just fall asleep. It's really strange. Like a Ralph Bakshi world or something, cool world, right? But, sometimes I'll think about what it would really be like to have myself show up on an alien world. It's fully civilized. They have buildings and vehicles, and some people are walking outside, some people riding in vehicles, some people are eating dinner, whatever. And then you show up and you look different than them, even if it's almost identical, but maybe their eyes are a little further apart and they have an extra limb, or they all have the same hair or whatever it is. And you show up and you have to assume that you would freak them out on some level. And it wouldn't matter if you showed up in a vehicle and you did some big, day the earth stood still thing, and you land on one of their baseball fields, and then they gather around and they know that someone's coming out and they know you're not from their planet, and then you come out and try to make peace. How do you write that dialogue? That you would gain their trust, because if they're smart, they have to wonder what you're there for. And so no matter how you run the alien landing scenario in my mind, I mean, I think that most of us are pretty sophisticated on average. Okay. Well, I've done several episodes about what it's like to truly meet an alien. I have a whole episode about meeting an alien, and we slow time down to like milliseconds, where your consciousness is seeing something you've never seen before. And what does that really mean to you? I mean, maybe you're some Australian kid who just threw a huge party and you've seen a bunch of shit the night before, and it's like you're half stoned anyway, and you're like, dude, what's up, man? I've always wanted to meet an alien, you know? Maybe that's it, right? Crikey. That'd probably be the best scenario, to be honest. But so we're out there, you know, we're listening to it. Maybe it's a distant thing. They're talking over radio. We've seen them fly over. And then it's all Hollywood after that if it's fake, right? So you put yourself in their shoes. They're trying to figure out how to do first contact. What do they do in Star Trek? Again, we owe Gene Roddenberry so many thanks for the way that he kicked off a franchise that allowed us to analyze these algorithms. First contact was something introduced in Next Generation, and it went all the way up to 2005 in Enterprise, right? So that's 4 shows, excuse me. And it was always, typically in Star Trek, if it was a mistake, it was a mistake. And there's some of those episodes as well. But they would take, the mistake one I remember was they were hiding in an observatory in a rock, and the face was actually open so they could see the people down below, who was kind of a primitive tribe. And something went wrong. They tried to infiltrate the tribe. It seems like it's always Riker that gets caught up in this thing. But then it's their spiritual mythos against reality. And eventually they had to take a woman up to the ship and tour her around. Of course, they show her freaking out. Very beautifully done. And then she's got to go home and pitch something else. And of course, Data was involved too. And he's an android. It's all strange. But others were that the top scientist, there's 2 or 3 episodes like this, where the top scientist for the government was a very CCP kind of thing, where it was like there's a bunch of propaganda about the beginning of their species. And in one of the episodes, it was that they were descendants of humans, or we were descendants of them, or one or the other. And I think it was they were descendants of us, and that couldn't be allowed in their mythos of their culture. And so they were fighting it. The science officer fought it. And in a couple episodes, they left it hanging where, the bad side won for the temporary situation that the episode ended in. These are all brilliantly done. But if we're truly going to analyze what it would take to cross that barrier, I think that we all think that, oh yeah, man, all we need is 1 million of them to show up, which sounds like a lot, but that's a tiny percentage of the Earth's population. But they got to show up. They got to have some goodies and some big red bag. And then as long as we all benefit quickly, hey, we're totally good with it, right? Can you imagine that? How easy it'd be to take over Earth with the to serve man thing. What I think is fascinating about this time in 2020 is that it's never been easier to wake someone up. And I was just telling a friend of mine tonight that I've never seen the world so awake ever. At some point, awake, meaning they don't have to know anything about QAnon's whole thing, which is a lot of waking up, but maybe it's not real, to the point of just knowing Bill and Melinda Gates are involved with Fauci and the other, is it Bricks woman, whatever her name is, Brixer, whatever her name is, with George Soros, with Harvard University, with just a bunch of nefarious money going around that's developing this virus. Again, we got the patent from Google. So when we talk about outrageous circumstances like aliens landing on Earth, well, maybe 20 years ago, the only thing that would soften the blow would be a raging Star Trek series, which would be 30 years ago to get a really raging one going. And then, or maybe a movie that Steven Spielberg makes, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Imagine if they had shown up in 1979 after Close Encounters, before Well, Star Wars would have been out as well. And so we're like, oh, I've seen the cantina scene, so I know it, it's what it's like to see an alien that's shaped really weird compared to human, anatomy. And because Close Encounters made all those aliens at least mostly friendly. They did steal a kid out of a house. For me, just to loop back to, because I don't know if I ever made this direct insinuation. I think I did. We know that today, the kids are a commodity for a bunch of weird reasons, right? Adrenochromes and a bunch of other sacrificial things that these nutbags worship. The Moloch group, the Abramovich group, all this other stuff. So when I hear that these groups, CIA's converted in around 47, right? There's the Roswell thing. And then there's all this talk about people being abducted, especially children, even out of the womb of women. And then we fast forward to today and you're like, oh, so it wasn't really an alien story. It was a bunch of your crazy ritual stuff, and you're covering it with abductions from aliens. How convenient. So we have to keep that in mind as well. Then there's the age-old question, which is, are these aliens really there? And are they waiting for us to hit a level of maturity ourselves before they come down? And so the threshold is not a technological threshold of like Star Trek, the Zephyr and Cochrane storyline, which is so brilliant. You hit warp, which means you're now capable of deep space travel. And so once you create warp, your first warp test is successful. Somebody's elected to come down and say hello. We got the Vulcans. And the Vulcans were played beautifully, right? They're not emotional, but they kind of are. They're always angry. I think that's funny. So Star Trek has one faux pas with the Vulcans is that they're always pissed. Only Spock wasn't pissed, but everyone else was pissed constantly. And super sarcastic and demeaning, which is an emotion. It's a technique. But what if it was some form of consciousness that we have to hit before they do their big hello? Okay, so then the question is, how many of us have to be at that level before they're willing to do it? If 75 million people is 1% of the world population, then that's a lot of people. 1% doesn't sound like that much, does it? Is there anything higher than that? 75 million. Just think about trying to get 75 million people on the same page. That's tough. That sounds impossible. So it seems as if they wouldn't wait for such a thing. Now, let's say that they were, as Laura Eisenhower says, they've been here for decades. And we know that all media is controlled, all television and movies are all controlled, all the scripts are rewritten to advance agendas and this and that. Then maybe, you would expect to see a bunch of films and television, if this was a good thing, like our governments weren't totally against us, and they would be advancing this narrative about how to make communication with an alien. You would assume that at least one show would come out where it was like, this is who they are good, and here's something, if not 4 or 5 different things that you never thought about that they want to give us. To serve man, which is, 1960 or something like that, somewhere in that window, with Lurch playing the alien dude, right? Their whole thing was to feed us, come here, cure us all of our diseases, get rid of poverty, make, crops as clean as possible. There was no GMO at the time. Clean it all up. Everything's organic. Everything's bumping, man. Watermelons are like this big and they're lush and amazing. No seeds, and they're fattening us up to ship us to their planet to eat us. But we think we're going there to visit. The only way to get rid of that narrative would be to say that, you're never going to go to our planet, and we're not going to put that many people down here to eat you, so don't even worry about it. It'd have to be some agreement like that. But then, it'd be like human beings negotiating with ants. No, we won't hurt your little fort you got down there, and sorry about the rain. We'll put a little bowl over your place to keep you okay so you don't die. But at any moment we could just stomp you and you'd be gone. So I think it would be something we don't deal with in humanity anymore because we have religion to protect the family unit and to establish some laws, and then we turn them into government laws. But like my friend a long time ago said, he goes, religion was the birth of the family, because you couldn't have a sanctity of marriage without rules to keep the biggest guy in the village from killing you and taking your wife. The sort of harem mentality that we used to have, which some places on earth still have. So imagine us dealing with, on a daily basis, what would be a really confusing thing for the human mind would be a gray. The female grays are supposedly, which they're beige, they're tan, and they're 6 feet. So a grown man would be staring this female in the face. And then the boys are the bluish gray 4-footers. But imagine that the females are, few and far between. Maybe it's matriarchal society. But imagine a bunch of human beings dealing with smaller beings being utterly superior to them and realizing that you can't shake at any point in time this notion that they could destroy you if they wanted to. And that changes the game. That changes the game. It would make us behave. Maybe it would make us behave in a way that is sort of good for us, and sometimes it might make us behave weird, like that Twilight Zone with the kid who wished everyone into the cornfield. It's good that you did that. It's good that you wished him to the cornfield. It's like, everyone's like, God damn, don't send me out there. What's he like today? Like, what's going to make him back? Because he would, the beautiful thing about that episode of Twilight Zone was that the kid would change what he liked from day to day. And so you could wear a particular shirt with a particular color on a particular day. You could listen to music of a particular kind, but he would change his mind. And all of a sudden you go in to do the same thing that worked yesterday, and you're now violating his daily swing. It'd be really interesting to make that into a movie, and then not only portray him as the child that did all the things that he did in the Twilight Zone, but then portray him as a pre-adolescent and then an adult, and then, get to the point where he's basically down to 2 or 3 people who are maybe his parents. And then he grows up and finds out he's been a devil his whole life, and then see if he doesn't try to reconstitute the universe back into something better, right? Anyway, food for thought, man. It's, every time I think I'm sort of out of that, or out of ammo for those storylines and these trains of thought, I guess you could call it, there's a bunch in there. There's just so much to analyze, so much to think about. And I think that, I think it would be funny because you guys interact too. I'm the first guy that talks, and then you guys are the next people that talk. And so it'd be interesting if this all occurred and we were much better prepared to lead during this phase of communicating with these aliens, because we've had an advanced conversation over and over and over again about it. I just see so many unknowns that would throw us off, as much as you plan. It's just like a good battle plan. It survives about one shot, and then it's like, oh my God, it's all different. Holy cow. I'll throw a crazy one that just occurred to me. They show up and everything's cool, but they have like a dog creature that is sort of their weird pet. And they seem to just travel with this pet. And it's weird looking and it's ferocious looking and it seems to be pretty nice, but they feed it in front of you and it just destroys whatever the food is. And so you see the potential in this pit bull thing that they bring with them. Just imagine how that would screw everything up. You know, you'd be just like, oh my God, they're pretty cool, but that pet thing, or what the hell is it there for? Is it there to eat me at some point? What if it mistakens me for its food? What if my kid looks like its food? You know, there's just so many variables. It's nuts. Let me know what you think. I'd be interested in everyone's thoughts on whether or not you think they're really going to try an alien invasion in the next 10 years. Do you think that, I mean, and let's remember, just like Bible people believe the end of the world's always going to be coming, and it never does, unfortunately. You know, since this von Braun theory hatched in late 70s, which I don't know when the secretary first said this. I know I've seen videos of her in the 90s saying this, but you would think she would have dropped that idea pretty soon after von Braun died, which I think was 78 or something like that. But do you think it's going to happen? And, you know, what does that entail? What do you think are the factors that are, you know, some of the things I didn't mention, that the first thing on the tip of your tongue that's like, you didn't even say anything about this. And it's some other wing of complete chaos that we'd have to deal with. Fill up the comments. Let's see what we can come up with. Anyway, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. We have 2 video feeds, YouTube and BitChute. Please create a BitChute account. It's a freedom of speech zone. Again, the more users they have, the more money they can raise to keep it going. It'd be really shitty if it just disappeared. If you want some audio, there's 2 audio feeds for you. Social media. We have a locked Facebook group full of some great people. It's getting a little bit of uptick. I tweet a little bit more than I used to. I don't like Twitter that much because it's just all dark. I mean, if you want to see the darkest human condition on this planet, Twitter has got to be right next to some ghetto somewhere. I mean, it's just horrible. We've got Minds.com, which is a competitor to Facebook, but it's First Amendment protected. Please make an account over there for the same exact reasons we want one on BitChute. Gab.com seems to be quite a ways behind everyone else. Like they don't have any sensitivity for URLs, and so I post a video in there and there's no thumbnail for it. So, you know, maybe they get there. I don't know why they don't have it since WordPress has it. It seems like it's just some module out there and you can just cut and paste into your code. But Minds.com is beautiful. I truly hope there's some celebrity who moves over there and says, I'm not doing Facebook anymore. If you want to see me, you got to go to Minds, because that would be awesome. But since celebrities are all, you know, compromised on average, that's why they don't move. There's a couple of ways to donate to the site: PayPal and Patreon. Patreon gets you in the credits forever, gets you early access to videos like this, and there's a 20% discount on the store. But I know times are rough, so don't even sweat it. There are 2 designs for shirts in the store. I own one of each, and I would say the quality is utterly fantastic. The pullover I got for the second design thing is so soft, I can't even tell you. It's like I don't even want to wash the thing because I don't want to change its composite, but it's really nice and thick. Shirts are super thick too because they're Hanes, so it's awesome. If you're looking for the first 100 episodes, they're not on this season or not on this channel. They're off on their own channel. I put them off on a different channel so I don't interrupt the flow of the counts, because I had to remaster about 104 episodes, which was no fun. BitChute has them all, which is beautiful. So if YouTube ever disappeared for any reason or we got banned or whatever, then it'll all go BitChute. Of course, I own all the masters, so we can put it up on a different platform. YouTube's acting really strange, man. I posted, like, they've redone their studio software. So when I post, there's a really nice wizard that takes your video up. But for the Corona one about Corona response, the coronavirus response, I actually told them not to monetize it because I knew they were going to turn it off anyway. And they automatically turned it on and then limited it. So sort of strange there. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.